at culture and climate change. Two things that persons might have a bit of difficulty putting together, but we're looking forward to an exciting discussion and really insightful perspectives and reflections. So I am ably joined on this panel by, I'm just going to make sure I get right, Amanda T. McIntyre, Suzanne Burke, and Alana Brooks. So Alana Brooks has a deep connection with nature, a fascination with avant-garde creatives, and a strong belief in the power of civic engagement to define the interest in her as an architectural designer. These passions are not just abstract ideals, they are reflected in every aspect of her academic, personal, and professional life. Alana holds a BSc in Social Sciences from the University of West Indies and a Master of Architecture from the University of Toronto. She continues to contribute to the academic community as an instructor at two Barbados tertiary education institutions, which is BCC, the Barbados Community College, within the Division of Technology and the Division of Fine Arts, and the Samuel Jackson Prescott Institute of Technology within the Building Studies Division. I'm also joined by Suzanne Burke. Suzanne Burke is a cultural studies scholar whose work employs the domain of culture as a pathway to Caribbean socio-economic transformation. Her research focuses on Caribbean culture, carnival, industries and culture, creative entrepreneurship, and management, as these relate to the development and evaluation of cultural practices and programs. She is a dedicated teacher who employs radical pedagogies to create epistemologies about cultural studies, arts-based practice, and creative entrepreneurship. She's worked extensively with a wide cross-section of public sector enterprises, civil society organizations, and private agencies in the areas of strategic planning, human resource development, policy analysis, cultural sector mapping and planning, and audience impact analysis. Ms. Amanda T. McIntyre is a Trinidadian writer, artist, and scholar. She is the 2025 Tilton Access Fellow. Her project, Present Continuous, explores Caribbean architectural and sartorial cultures, towards developing a sustainable practice of archiving contemporary Caribbean masquerades. She's also the creative director and principal designer at Doddy Mass Visual and Performing Arts Company. McIntyre's visual art and scholarship focuses on the baby doll masquerade that was historically presented as abandoned and destitute. However, after more than 15 years of intervention, the masquerade was revised into a self-possessed person who exercises political agency in the interest of herself and her child. Following this critical cultural shift, interpretations of the art form expanded to include a range of expressions that veer away from what was previously called traditional to what McIntyre identifies as the contemporary Caribbean baby doll masquerade. Her essays about this phenomenon have been published in Tooth Moon, Caribbean Journal of Cultural Studies, and Caribbean Quality. Welcome, Ms. Brooks, Dr. Burke, and Ms. McIntyre. Welcome to this conversation. It also behooves me, of course, to welcome Premier Wheatley of the British Virgin Islands. Pleased to have you here, sir. And we're looking forward to an exciting conversation. So if you're looking at this online, live, or if you're looking at this after the event is finished, we are still very happy to have you here with us. And so this is how this conversation is going to go. I'm going to give each panelist 15 minutes to introduce their topic. Now, we actually have less time, I just realized, so I'm going to give each panelist 10 minutes. But I mean, I am flexible. So they each prepared 15-minute presentations, actually, so go for it, and let's go with it as we can. But if you can't keep it to 10, that would be appreciated. Then I'm going to say a few words. I'll probably say less on my end. And then we're going to, if there are any interventions from the audience, you take those as well. And we're going to have a conversation, and then we'll close. Right? So that's how this is going to go. So I'm going to actually jump right in by handing over the floor to Ms. Alana Brooks.
Okay, so good afternoon. I'm so honored to be here. So I'm Alana Brooks. I'm an architectural designer, as Caroline had mentioned, and also an educator, I would say, a bit of an explorer. So the images that I'm thinking that you're able to see are all images which I have put together. I guess I would like to believe that I'm multifaceted. So, so outside of architecture, as you know, you might just assume that architecture is about building, about designing buildings. I'm into art, collages, drawing, and so on. So all of what you're going to see are things that I have put together. So first off, so I want to, again, stress that from my perspective, that architecture is not just a technical practice, right? It is an art form from my perspective, and that's how I approach the field, and that's how I hope to continue to position myself. And so when it came to this talk, I thought that this was really how I would be approaching this conversation, the idea of how architecture is not just a technical thing, but it's about culture. It's a cultural and ethical act, right? And in terms of climate change and the challenges that we are experiencing, architecture has a lot to offer in terms of the conversation when it comes to change and when it comes to identity and culture. So architecture is not just about buildings, it's about people, identity, and the environments that shape us. So on the screen, you're seeing this word statelessness, right? And statelessness essentially was a concept that was proposed really as a provocation by the CDB a couple years ago. They had this brilliant project, the CIF program, the Cultural and Creative Industry and Innovative Fund. So they put forward this concept called, they entitled it Statelessness, and they essentially invited artists and technocrats around the Caribbean to participate in terms of looking for solutions to how we may maintain or protect or regenerate cultural artifacts in the Caribbean in response to the challenges of climate change. So I approach this from my perspective as an architect, well, as an architectural designer, as an educator, as an artist, and so on. And so what you're seeing are some of the collages that I would have submitted as part of my contribution, the submission to my in terms of the exhibition and so on that was part of this statelessness provocation. So it's really about the idea of displacement, but not only displacement that is physical or physical migration due to crises, but also that idea of disturbance and destruction to a sense of self that happens when communities or nations experience crises, right? This idea of this upheaval, the idea of losing artifacts that are part of your identity. You don't only move, but also your memories, your identity, all of that is affected. So in terms of design and architecture, what could that mean really and truly? That was the question that I was tackling. What could architecture and art offer to that challenge, this idea of displacement, not just physical, but also cultural and so on. So of course, just some more of those images. And so of course, to go forward, I think that, it's always great to look backwards. And the Caribbean knows the idea of statelessness well already, right? Largely due to how many of the islands, the countries and so on, we are derived from a plantation economy. And so I'm a Barbadian, so I know the Barbadian chattel house, and I know that, chattel houses really were a response to the instability that certain classes of people experienced, especially during the times of the plantation economy, where really and truly you had to be able to move your home. If you were living in a chattel house, the chattel houses were portable, adaptable, expandable, and so on, and rooted in the reality of then, right? And so this idea of statelessness was always relevant. And further to that, the physical features of the chattel house are relevant or responsive to the reality of Caribbean climate and weather, right? In terms of dealing with temperature and ventilation and the quality of the interior space of the chattel house. So the chattel houses have a lot to analyze or to remember. And it's really and truly we wonder whether in 50 years there'll still be any chattel houses in Barbados, So I thought it was important to pay reverence to that. And so now coming forward and looking backwards and moving forward, this idea of instability maybe it's a different type of instability now as the Caribbean has evolved, but it's instability that is due to these extreme weather events, more so this notion of having to respond to crises, being able to move quickly, and what that means now in 2025 and 2026, what that means for the future. So some of these images, again, are conceptual images, really. I mentioned the word solutions, but it's not that I'm able to provide these solutions as yet. I'm really trying to provoke the questions or idea of what is space? How do we define space? How do we reflect our identity via space when there is so much instability? So these were just models. These are just models combined with drawings and so on, collages, that kind of were just meant to represent, the dwelling of a musician, the dwelling of a fisherman, and so on, conceptually, right, via these images. And so on to, so the big idea, how do we design for resilience without losing who we are? So another big question then is that it's not just the Caribbean that is responding to the instability that climate change is posing. In the architectural world, modular architecture that can easily move and so on, is a conversation or is a big trend within building throughout the world, right? So it might be very easy for us to adopt solutions in terms of building, solutions that we see or copy from nations like China, and for lack of a better example. That might be easy, but is that us being true to us? So it's the question of how do we achieve resilience and so on, but still retain or protect some kind of identity. Okay, so also looking back, I had that slide there with the chattel house drawings again, because then some of the designs then that I came up with, or I was trying to suggest, were based on this idea of modularity and also the cultural kind of remnants of what it meant to have a home that can move and so on. And so, for instance, this is meant to be a contemporary version of contemporary design that is inspired by kind of the agglomeration of multiple chattel houses and so on. So this is the kind of work that I do. Okay, and then moving on, beyond the idea of homes, because we've spoken a lot about residences, what does instability mean when it comes to shared spaces? So these spaces that are meant to be accessible to all of us or represent a full community or a full nation, an entire nation, and so on. So how can we design these spaces? What are they? What types of spaces can protect the artifacts that represent an entire nation, not just a person? So part of my work was to explore, modular architecture that could perhaps come together and, house or protect things like museums or teaching spaces and that kind of things. How is that possible? And how is it possible in reality, technically, as well? So all of that is what my work is, kinds of questions that I'm exploring. And I mean, further to that, I think a big question is, okay, how then does architecture then relate to multimedia? Is it really just about buildings, or is it about a museum that is within just a building, or are we recording the sound of the sea or the sound of town and so on? Is that how we will record or protect our identity? So how does different media interact with this kind of preservation of culture? And so then lastly, I do teach. So I believe that education, the conversations that we have, the explorations that the younger generation is embarking upon is so important to what's coming up next. And so I think that education really has to play a major part in terms of what is part of the curriculum or what is part of the syllabus that the students that I interact with, so the design students, the drawing students and so on, who will be involved in maintaining the built environment or constructing the new spaces and so on. What are they bringing to the table? What are they remembering? What are they protecting? Who are they learning from also? Are we able to connect? I believe that we should be finding a way to connect with persons who still have these skills or the knowledge of how to make things that are specific or special to the Caribbean. And so I'm hoping that becomes a concrete part of how we teach, how we shape the younger generation. So really and truly, it's a call to action. The past teaches resilience. The present, it demands the innovation, and an authentic future for us depends on really knowing our identity. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Ashe, thank you very much. I'm going to keep the conversation going, Amanda. We're going to dive into joint conversation between everyone after all the contributions are made. So Amanda, you can take the floor by all means.
With that, we say welcome to Hazel Brown in studio here at 107.7.
It's good to be here. I've never been here before, so.
Well, it's great to have you.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the work that you have done, you continue to do. It's an inspiration, I know, to many.
Drawing on the richness of our roots to create new space to tell the whole story. And what's that? That's one thing you can do and do is tell story.
It has been an amazing experience, kind of going to school about advocacy. The whole business of strategic thinking and planning and understanding how the policy process works so that you can intervene in it in appropriate ways. Who is the right person to speak to? What is the right tone and language to use for the specific, whether you're talking to a technical person or a public servant or a politician. The question of preparation for advocacy and lobbying is as important as the actual advocacy and lobbying itself.
May your heart find peace anywhere you come from. Coulda up, you coulda down, blessings on my nation. Ooh, yeah. Oh yeah. This city can't hold me. My vibe's too high, and my heart it told me jump right now. You will touch the sky. Feel my love unfolding like a laughing flame. All who did not know me when I done, they gon' know the name. Million people coming down, dancing to a feel this free. Million people coming down, dancing to a song. Love is life and life is love. Blessings from above. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Well, if you feel it, let me hear you say, dancing, moving, moving everywhere. If you feel it, let me hear you say, na 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 na, eh na 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 na. Na 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 na, eh na 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 na. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Dancing, moving, moving everywhere. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Dancing, moving, moving everywhere. Take me to the river, take me to the sea. Wash over me music, wash over me. Take me to the river, take me to the river. Wash over me music, wash over me.
But as I told my mother once, when she asked me why don't I stay home and look after my children, that I do what I have to do because I have the support of a whole lot of women. And I told my mother that evening I was going to Tabakit. I said, I'm going to Tabakit tonight, and if anything happens to me in Tabakit,
Yes.
I'll ask them to give me a piece of paper and I will write on it the names of 3 women who look after my children, and then I would die and go to heaven.
So
To say
it's a
that I am
cause.
doing what I have because I know that I have the support of a substantial number of women who I can count on
Yes.
in the worst situation
Yes.
that I could find myself in.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon, everyone. Last night I had a bit of a rough passage to get here, so it was good to wake up to such a magnificent day. A warm welcome to you, a warm welcome, and thanks to special people here like the Honorable Premier Natalia Wheatley. Thanks also to our visionary curator of Big Conversations, Dr. Mariel Barrow-Magnan. Thanks to the moderator, Karen Niles, my fellow panelists, and all attendees. And of course, big up to the Caribbean family at home and abroad, and an extra special large up to our gracious Barbados host of CARIFESTAXV. Dolly Mass is a house of stories, and today I will tell you one of them. This is our big story. Today, it begins in the mid-19th century. French provincial architecture has taken root in the Caribbean. Almost immediately, the typology takes on the inflections of the islands. As with nation languages, so too nation architectures emerge, with each location producing its own vernacular of the aesthetic. The buildings acquire features that respond to the Caribbean's weather. Jalousies, jallies, demerara windows, high ceilings, wide verandas, and wrought iron accents. The typology is designed for ventilation and hurricane resilience. The architecture moves from being French provincial to French Creole. Walls borrowed from the indigenous Ajupa, echoes of the Tapia House and Chattel House, fretwork with Ghanaian and Adinkra symbols, and various details signaling African, South Asian, and East Asian influences. At the same time, there's a peculiar image that has started wandering through Caribbean carnivals. But is it a woman or is it a girl? Perhaps it is a doll. Yes, the baby doll has entered the scene. She is nameless, but in Martinique, she's amongst distinguished pairs, Poupée, Pissenlit, Tipamai, and Nbebe. Like all masquerades, she is on the move. She is transported in the creative imagination of inter-island migrants. They remember her voice, her movement, her style, and her meaning. Soon, she is sighted in Trinidad among the Jamettes and takes on characteristics of that demographic. Jamettes are loud and riotous. This subculture of Trinidad's urban centers appears on the front line of the major protest of that time, and their advocacy is the precursor to waves of Caribbean feminism that would take hold later on in the 20th century. By the mid-20th century, Baby Doll finally has her name and a new dress, but little has changed in her speech and movement. However, by the time the millennium turns, she quantum leaps into a new age. The girl who once roamed the city begging for money grows up into a powerful, self-possessed person. The Baby Doll is her own advocate. The architecture's development continues as well. It takes on distinct features with the availability of new materials and techniques for construction. However, the typography is on the decline. Fires are one of the main threats. The buildings are also more and more weathered as time passes. Season after season of hot sun and rain beaten down are beginning to show. The architecture is resisting, but is still vulnerable to the weather. The main threat, however, is gentrification. One by one, these icons of Caribbean architectural cultures disappear from the landscape. And so, these two aesthetics of masquerade and architecture developed in tandem on different trajectories, but still growing up together. But let's pause and travel even further back in time to the mid-18th century, when the cedula of population invited foreign settlers into the country in what would prove to be a successful population booster. In Trinidad, there was the promise of land, jobs, and myriad privileges for those officially registered in this drive, and more for each person who came along with families. People were coming into Trinidad, bringing with them their possessions, and at that time, possessions included other people. It is in this milieu that Cynthia Bethencourt arrives in Trinidad as part of the La Perouse family estate. Young, beautiful, and powerful, she is trained in the practice of ancestors. She experiments with voodoo and dreams of Caribbean futures. There is also Brigitta, the magical child of the forest who has relocated to the city. These two women meet in Port of Spain, become friends, and are forever tethered to each other. Retreating to the La Perouse graveyard, they are able to develop their esoterics and their erotics. The cemetery is a good place for making magic. It's also a good place for making love. In the shadows of tombs, Brigitta and Cynthia give their attentions to their desires. In these magical experiments, they summon the Haitian Loa, Mama Brigitte, who opens a portal and they begin time traveling. The passage through time is subject to the changing weather, intense heat, hurricanes, and earthquakes, and the passage through these temporal textures changes the forms of the travelers. In this shape-shifting, they are able to engage the world in different bodies and create a family that is supported by love and magic. When we last saw them in 2022, they had lost each other on a carnival day. This is the story of Brigitta and Cynthia, and it is the main narrative of the Dolly Mass Visual and Performing Arts Company. It gives a fully developed, complex story to a masquerade whose speech up until the early 21st century was still limited to 3 minutes of performance time. At the core of the Dolly Mass universe is this love story of two women trying to find each other. It is about the many ways in which love survives changes that in some cases includes the devastations of enduring a climate emergency. As a result, the protagonists revise their maps, constantly check compasses, clocks, and calendars. They reflect on the past for guidance and peer into the future to witness all our possibilities. The Baby Doll is the prism through which I project my theory of contemporary Caribbean masquerade cultures. I wanted to create a complex universe in which my passions could thrive. Years ago, I wrote in my journal that the troop should look like a family time traveling with their real estate, that the villages should be bobbing above their heads. There is magical realism, surrealism, futurism, and retrofuturism in Dolly Mass. It is also a firmly rooted work that is grounded in the real world, grounded in the realities of climate change, the realities of gentrification, and myriad injustices that I, too, am vulnerable as a queer Black woman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We go straight on to the final panelist. Welcome, please, Dr. Suzanne Burke. The floor is yours.
Thank you. All protocols observed. Good afternoon, everybody. So I kind of take off where Amanda left, and we're continuing this conversation. And of course, my presentation is entitled From Earth Body to Earth Baby, Ecomass as a Modality for Climate Change Action in Caribbean Festival Performance. Can I have the clicker? Thanks. Right. So I'll leave that up on the screen so you can get a sense of what I'm going to talk about. She come real quiet, like a thief in the night. She come damn vex, because how we living, destroying the earth. And she come well armed with a response to stop all the havoc we causing. But she leave real confident that if we act together, we could save the earth. So what I'm going to talk about in the 10 minutes that Karen has given me, and there's a timer, 8.36. I don't understand, you know. Anyway, right, that talks about my embodiment of this character. I have played mass my entire life. But I've played mass in community. I've never played as an individual. And this character came to me one Sunday morning in my kitchen while making breakfast. The whole thing come. What she wants me to say, what she wants me to do, and how she wants me to do it. So my presentation is an overview of the conceptualization, making, and performance of Earth Baby. And inside of that, I'm going to talk about the potential of what I'm calling Ecomass as an organic Caribbean response to climate change. Mariel is looking at me like if I'm crazy. And the larger issue is the role of arts and humanities in constructing new epistemologies about how we live in more than the human world. So how we live in the environment. I am positing that eco-mass making and performance can challenge, it challenged mine, our ingrained beliefs about developmental progress because of its capacity to present alternative visions and practices for a sustainable future. In unpacking my performance, I'm guided by 3 things that I want us to think about. The first thing is about making. So there's a whole theory about making. And making, and I draw from Ingold 2014, that says that cultural artifacts are imbued with meaning and shaped by tradition and memory. Okay? So they are not just a costume. You know, we like to say, well, it's a costume. Right? It is imbued with memory and tradition. And because those costumes and our performances of them hold knowledge, they are also a portal to action. So that is Ingold, the theory of making. The other thing that I discovered after Pleshy, after she come and embody me and teeth my head, right, is the theory of ecosomatics and ecoscenography, right? New thing, 2024. That talks about ecological design for performance. And that design dissolves, and Amanda is the co-creator, so Amanda could talk to this experience. It dissolves the barriers or the lines between an artist, the materials that are used, and the audiences, right? And it also talks about how you perform, where you perform, so that you are one with the ecology in which you are performing, right? And of course, in the carnival tradition, that is all over the place in Trinidad. The other important thing I want us to think about as I talk is this notion of ecosomatics, the body as a way of knowing. In fact, when we know in our bodies, we know more powerfully in our senses than if we know just theoretically in our head. And finally, I want to pay homage to a friend of mine who's passed away, Tony Hall, who came up with this emancipatory cycle of creativity. And of course, I'm backward mapping here because I play the girl and then I start to theorize about the girl because that's me, right? I'm an academic, that's what I do. But what came after Tony's theory of creativity and the emancipation that comes in that creativity. And I was able to identify in the way that I played Earth Baby, the meditation. So she come in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. So when I get up and I tell my students, did you tell me that this morning? Well, they know I'm not a morning person. I'm still in a fugue state, right? I'm in a liminal state, to use the whatever. I don't get up really until 10 o'clock, right? But I'm up, but things are in my mind are still in a kind of liminal state, right? That's when she comes. That's what Tony calls the meditative state. And then she manifests. And that manifestation turned into a whole performance, transformation. And then what it did to me, because she never leave me. Once she comes, she stay there. Some days she talks more than others. Today she kind of quiet, right? But okay. So I want us to look at this. It's a very short video, and then we'll kind of try to unpack it. And I hope this sound works. She come real quiet, like a thief in the night. She come damn vexed, because how we living, destroying the earth. But she come well armed, with a response to stop all the havoc we causing. And she leave real confident that if we take action together, we could save the earth. We got to save the earth. I am Divine Mother, Isis, Oshun, Shakti, who consorted with human to bring forth my child, Earth Baby. But human's greed, selfishness, and neglect are impeding her growth. The proliferation of toxic waste, impure air, polluted waterways, and barren fields are turning Earth Baby into a wasteland at risk of extinction. Tonight, I manifest as the quintessential character of Baby Doll, to expose the truth of human's abuse of Earth Baby. I come to reveal his true and evil nature and to demand reparations of US $1.3 trillion per year maintenance to restore my baby's health. Tonight, I illuminate the exploitation of one of Earth Baby's most important needs and resources. Water, only. I unmask the role of capitalism in creating one of the biggest marketing gimmicks of our time, the packaging and sale of water in plastic bottles. This US $333.2 billion profit-motivated industry has wreaked havoc on Earth Baby's well-being. Plastic bottles are causing distress to aquatic animals, blocking waterways, and releasing toxic chemicals into the atmosphere. To signify Earth Baby's distress, I am vested in bottled water's waste material. My skirt is made from deconstructed water bottles. My hat from its bottle caps. And my jewelry and other forms of adornment from its labels. Through my divine authority, I restore Earth Baby to her newborn pristine state. I order the stemming of global warming through the reduction of fossil fuels and the adoption of cleaner forms of energy. Through my divine wisdom, I re-established Earth Baby on her path of righteous development. I demanded that natural resources and ecosystems are protected and managed to ensure their sustainability for future generations. And through my divine love, I reconnect Earth Baby to the divine world. I declare a more balanced and respectful relationship with the natural world to ensure peace, justice, equity, and compassion for all. Ashe, 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 Ashe. All right, so I don't need to tell you who Earth Baby is, who Baby Doll is, because Amanda kind of spoke about that. But I just want to kind of talk about how she performs. So according to Hill, historically, right, her movements, her gestures, her speech are loose and loud, aimed at attracting a great deal of attention. And in the carnival moment, the carnivaless allows the baby doll to use her voice, right, to exert agency, and of course, in some iterations, in the original iterations, to talk to errant fathers to take responsibility for their children. So in other words, she's used to shine a light on a myriad of social issues. And to quote an old friend of mine, Jackie Burgess, Jackie says that the baby doll is such a powerful character that you can use it for almost anything. That whole thing about advocacy and how you build and share awareness of certain issues, the baby doll's voice could be used. So I want to talk a little bit about the making and the performance of the doll. And of course, in making baby doll, we unmade baby doll, right? So it's about the making and unmaking of baby doll. So the thing that came to me, the message that came to me, is that we are destroying the earth by using these plastic water bottles. The first thing is that water is a free resource. It's been packaged, it's for sale, and it's everywhere. It's omnipresent in our natural world, and it causes a fair amount of havoc, right? So Earth Baby acknowledges that the baby doll's position is a cultural object whose material qualities can shape meaning, as I said. So we're going back to the theory of making. I embody baby doll as the universal divine mother. So I am the mother whose baby is the earth, but I made the earth because I consorted with human, and I spell human like that, right? So I explore baby dolls, earth babies, cognitive and material significance. So what is she feeling, thinking, sensing? And when I perform her, all of those things become eminent. And then, of course, the material significance of how she was presented. In performance of Earth Baby, I involve audiences in what Griswold talks about as an extended set of meanings. Extended because in the Trinidad Carnival tradition, we know what the baby doll is about. But the way that we've unpacked her, we've turned her upside down. It's a new meaning, but they still connect with the new meaning, right? And that was apparent in the performance as well. So let's talk a little bit about the materiality of Earth Baby, right? And the message came that it should only be constructed with discarded things. The discarded bottles, the bottle caps, the labels. So you would see those things in the pictures, right? And of course, the garbage bag that is the base costume, because of course, the sea is a big garbage dump, right? And it's blue, so we could get into that as well. and the issue of blue and Yemanja and the sea and all of those kinds of things. But anyway, but there's now a dialogical process between the material's form and function, the context of the performance, and the design inputs, right? So we collected materials, bottles, right? Discarded bottles of all sizes. And in that very process of collecting the bottles, there's an awareness of the scale of the environmental challenge, right? Because bottles are everywhere, right? On campus, they're everywhere. At work, on the roadways, friends. So we were collecting bottles, the design team, and Amanda could talk a little bit about that. So there's the deconstructed bottle. On the left, more recently, the jewelry is made from the top of the bottle, right? And it's cut in the form of a flower, and we could talk about that in convo. And then the deconstructed bottle, and you can ask Amanda about that. So you cut the bottom off, and that is what made the base for the skirt, yeah? And there you have the hat, right? And of course, you're seeing the skirt a little more closely, right? And then, of course, the issue of where it was shot. The latter thing is shot in Lopino, and Amanda, and we didn't collaborate on this at all. So I was moved to do a photo shoot of Earth Baby in Lopino. Those of you who know Trinidad know that Lopino is an old plantation, and the Count de Lopino came to Trinidad under the cedula, okay? And so in performing Earth Baby there, it is her speaking back, because the plantation is the beginning of environmental degradation in this part of the world, right? So by putting her in the water in Lopino, right, you know, under the kind of shade of the Great House, we are saying this is where it started, right? The fact that they farmed lands and they left, they did not, you know, mind the environment, right? And there's a whole big Plantoprocene concept that we use to describe what that meant in terms of the environment. So in eco-scenography, we are privileging ecological design for performance. We are, of course, incorporating principles of the ecology to create recyclable, biodegradable, restorative, and/or regenerative performance spaces. So Earth Baby is being performed in the river at Lupino. While, of course, we did not use any natural materials to make her, by upcycling human waste products into a theatrical performance, it did have an ecological impact by, of course, very little bit lessening the carbon footprint. But in doing that, it brings awareness of greening policies to festivals such as Carnival. And I'm noting this morning in the big conversation, I'm sitting there and only plastic water bottles, and I'm going, whoa, right? Dread, right? I came here, I met one, I was like, I gave it back because I have my water bottle, right? Where a great number of these plastic bottles are used, right? So the final artifact, and I'm winding up now, 20 seconds. The final artifact represents a living text of the teams, and a team of people worked on her, shared their knowledge about baby dolls in general, but about performance more specifically, both tacit and explicit, that creatively reimagined and enunciated new ways to utilize the materials, thereby imbuing the costume with new meanings. So in terms of performance, very quickly, because the soma, the eco-soma, is also part of what we offer as a performance modality, right? The language, the script came first. The whole script came in my head, downloaded, right? And so the language was the element that guided everything else. So Amanda says she could tell you that I had the whole script, I gave the script to them. The first element is the language. It utilized, of course, a variety of rhetorical devices to deliver the eco-message of retort and repair. Tonight, I manifest as the quintessential character of Baby Doll, to expose the truth of humans' abuse of Earth Baby, tonight, I illuminate the exploitation of one of Earth Baby's most important needs, water, pani, omi. I unmask the role of capitalism in creating one of the biggest marketing gimmicks of our time, the packaging and sale of water in plastic bottles. So we're using metaphors and for hyperbole to give her performance a little more gravitas, right? And of course the music, those of you who all like me would have recognized the music. It is Brother Resistance's iconic song, Mother Earth, which he made in 1991. So we're dealing with these things for a while, right? And of course the music is also resonant with the crowd, right? Because they would know, let my vibes be one with you, Mother Earth. Let my vibes be one with you, Mother Earth. I only want to know you. I only want to know your mother. To know you is to love you, Mother Earth. Oh, Mother Earth. And in the refrain, he's saying, is it too late? Is it too late? Is it too late? Is it too late to save the earth? We got to save the earth, right? So the music is important. And of course, the soma, which is how we know our world through our senses and our movement. You would see in the pictures there's a lot of use of the hands and the arms because she's pregnant. She actually births earth on stage in performance, right? So there's a big thing, and Amanda tied me up wrong and wrong, tight, right? So that I could not move. There was no movement, the bottom half. So the top, the arms, and of course the face is covered, right? So there is no, the audience cannot read my expressions because the face is covered. So the use of the hands and the arms to relay feelings of despair, derision, authority, divinity, and love, right? So we're moving from a mere representation of an iconic traditional carnival character to an experience of bodily knowledge and emotional resonance, right? So you're seeing again the use of the hands, the use of the arms in different positions, etc. Right? And of course, the closing of the performance was curated to instill hope, right? As she said, she leaves knowing that we should do something. So the end is like a prayer. Divine Mother has cleared the way for a new course of action to take root and to multiply. Yeah? So we are hoping that we know this is Tony's cycle of creativity, right? That starts with a meditation, then the manifestation, the transformation, liberation, and emancipation. And he says it's the continuing cycle of transcendence, a revolutionary vision to awaken or to juvie. And that's the possibility that our carnival characters offer if we do something meaningful with them, right? So the costume represented the main line of reaction and of course underscored the importance of material objects, in this case plastic water bottles, right, to mediate previously held beliefs and behavior, so that even for myself, I can no longer drink from a plastic bottle. I can't, right? So the mere fact that you are playing it, you're embodying it, it changes you, right? I incorporated earth body practices by making sensory and cognitive connections with the character, what Tony talks about as being in possession, right? Through the somatic journey, I discovered new pathways to apprehending the impact of climate change. So people in my office, people around me, they know not to come around me with no plastic water bottle, right? The way of being, this way of being holds new possibilities for us all. So behavior change, right? And of course, she's leaving there, and she's leaving knowing that maybe something might work out, maybe, right? And so the big conversation for me, right, is EcoMass, as I'm calling it, EcoMass, right, is a site of knowledge creation and transmission. And I want to say, me and the first girl, we do that, right? We doing in our masquerade traditions across the Caribbean. We use natural things, right? Leaves in Trinidad, we use leaf, we use crocus bag, we use all kinds of things, right? Natural things in the earth, right? But it provides novel utility for discarding items. And as if Black Jesus was hearing me, 2 weeks ago, I went to the Bahamas, and there was a John canoe made out of discarded beer cans, right? So I'm not saying I have nothing new. There's nothing new in the universe. But what it does do is provide awareness around climate change action and the possibility of using festival materials as a main avenue for advocacy and action. So greening policies, like Earth Baby, EcoMass can illuminate new and subversive ways of making climate change action part of our daily lives. And it's not a top-down policy, it's something that we're doing. It's organic, right? It's natural, it's agentic. Thank you.
All right, so while you formulate your questions, while you get ready for your interventions, ready for a big conversation, let me introduce myself. My name is Karen Niles. Niles is the name of my great-great-great-grandfather's slave master. And that is not just mentioned on a side. My research is tied to climate change and culture, but to start it, I actually published an article on climate change and slavery, because those are two manifestations of something we refer to as the tragedy of the commons. And the tragedy of the commons is when there is something that is commonly held, like fish in the ocean. I was going to say flying fish, but I'll behave myself. Like, let's use whales, a neutral subject, right? Let's use whales. Something that is commonly held. But if everyone keeps exploiting, will be depleted. And the problem is, if any one person pulls out, it does nothing to stop the other people from doing it and from benefiting. That's the problem with climate change now, because if any one oil company, like BP or BHP, if any one of them pull out, it doesn't stop Exxon or any of the other companies from continuing to profit. That's a tragedy of the commons, and that's what was also experienced with slavery, because if any one nation stopped using free labor, forced labor, it didn't stop. And when I actually read the transcripts of the House of Commons, I was listening to all these British politicians arguing with abolitionists, saying, why do you want France to be the premier nation in Europe? Why are you trying to bankrupt Britain by having us pay for labor? And that's not going to stop slavery. You know, in the same way you hear one oil company say, even if they stop production today, that's not going to stop other oil companies from drilling baby drilling. You know, that's a tragedy of the commons. Even if they know that it will lead to a tragedy in the end, they will keep doing it because it's going to keep making money. So I ask my students all the time that if after being exposed to the horrors of slavery, seeing the deleterious effects did not stop them from studying people, what makes you think that telling people about the bad effects of climate change on the planet, what makes you think that's going to stop them from studying a chemical? It didn't stop them from studying people. It's not going to stop people from studying a chemical. All right? So where that led me in my research was a realization that the people that were being converted from people to property in that system, that was happening because they were part of a larger plantation economy that was servicing the global north. And it was really fascinating to see that really and truly, it essentially converted people to an energy source. Because you can't use subsistence labor, you can't use like indigenous methods to power a plantation. You could use indigenous methods to feed your family, but if you want to feed all of Britain, you need a plantation, and you need workers, or you need machinery, which is what eventually ended slavery. As you saw from Eric Williams' work, Capitalism and Slavery, they realized that machines do not revolt. Machines don't try to run away from the plantation. They only need to be fed a little bit of energy. And in those days, it was coal. So coal was actually the solution, one of the key solutions that ended slavery. It was a really good thing at that point in time, particularly for abolitionists, because it gave them a leg to stand on economic grounds to end slavery. So coal was actually the solution that ended slavery, but then led to the next problem, which they didn't foresee, which is climate change. And now we're watching people trying to end the use of coal and end the use of fossil fuels, and you're seeing what they're transitioning to, and you're wondering, are we making the same mistake as we really try to go get rare earth metals and materials, and as all these deals with deep sea mining to get all these materials to power renewable energy, you wonder, are we going to find another solution that's going to cause a problem that we're not yet seeing? Now, this is really important because I began to ask myself the question, okay, so slavery led to the forcible displacement of millions and millions of people, so that I had to explain this to my friends in the Pacific who were not acquainted. They wanted to know why I can track my indigenous name, my African name, and I said, well, it's because Niles is the name of the slave owner, so it was a sign of ownership, and so what it meant was a loss of identity. And so the forced migration led to a loss of identity. And so what we're seeing now is climate change leading to forcible displacement. And so my research question is simply, will climate change do to the descendants of the Caribbean what slavery did to their forefathers? It's a simple question. Like, are we going to see people losing their identity because they're forced to move in the same way that our forefathers and ancestors lost their identity because they were forced to move? It may not be the same. You may need to move from one location to another location in the same country. You may be forced to move from one part of the region to another part of the region, like when Dominicans were forced to move to Trinidad, even temporarily. What are the cultural implications of those things? And even more so in the Pacific, where they literally are forced to move out of their countries altogether and abandon their countries. Like in the case of Tuvalu, which will no longer exist in a few years, the entire country needs to move. So what does that mean for your culture? And is that going to do to them what slavery did to us in terms of cutting us off from our ancestry? That's what my research is on, and that's what led me to be drawn to this conversation about that intersection between how we can use our culture to really begin to speak about this, because climate change is a cultural challenge. We need to, and to be honest, it brings us back to Alana's presentation, because waste does not exist in nature. Waste was designed into the process. We decided that there's things that are not useful for us that we're going to just dump. But waste does not exist in nature, is a man-made invention. Therefore, climate change is actually, and the thing that caused climate change, of course, was the fumes spouting carbon in the air, because, going to a climate change conference once, somebody said, carbon is not the problem. Stop blaming carbon. We put carbon there. We designed the system that put carbon in the atmosphere. So climate change is actually a design problem. How do we design ourselves out of this as a Caribbean civilization, as a Caribbean people? So you've heard us talk about what has brought us to this subject. We'd love to get you all involved in the conversation. Please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. You've heard us say a lot about how we're using mass, how we're using our work, how we're using our knowledge of our ancestry to kind of really investigate and interrogate solutions for the future. If you have any questions, please feel free to just raise your hand, and a mic will be brought to you. Thank you so much for bringing the mic. I appreciate you. Mario, let's start with you. Dr. Barrow.
I can't help myself, right? So there are a few things. Firstly, I performed. The only time I ever played mass was when I performed with Minshall. And that was for his tapestry presentation, which was a presentation constructed with leaves that was spray painted and then mounted onto netting, right, to create the back pieces, which were absolutely stunning. And so this conversation isn't new, or this way of doing mass isn't new. And in fact, we also have studies in terms of affect, right, and embodiment, and how embodied work or art, right, moves us to action. And it really depends on how we use the energy that art gives us and what direction we take with it. So when we leave here, we're going to still continue with the bottles, because I came with my bottle, right, my plastic bottle, because that's what they gave us and we have to drink water, right? So what are you going to allow that energy that is, stirred up in you when we hear a conversation like this to to act and to change something that we do, and also change the way we teach our children to do things. And so I guess my question is, with this mass, I mean, I heard Amanda speak of the support of the community of women, right? Is it changing the way that these young women do life, right? And make them more sensitive or more culturally aware in terms of climate change? You spoke also about architecture. What are the avenues for them to do differently? Because the work that we're talking about here remains oftentimes on the fringes, right? There was only one Minshall, and then there were maybe a few others who were similar to Minshall, kind of, but they didn't, I don't think they drove the agenda in the same way that Minshall did, right? So we're still the periphery, and as Karen said, if one person stops doing something that is wrong, it doesn't mean that the rest of them do. So what really is the next step?
If there are any more questions, I'll take them in a group, but if there's no more, you can... Oh, there's one more in the yellow. Do you want to ask one? Oh, okay, sorry.
Just a comment. So I'm a Trinidadian in the room, and I've never played mass before.
Okay.
And I've said that, yeah, there is still time.
I've never played mass either.
I've been to workshops before, and people were shocked to see a Trini never play mass, and I've always looked at it. And being here in the room, I actually feel inspired because I see it being part of the circular economy. I see it purpose-driven, that we could just echo in terms of how we could really save the planet. So thank you for sharing, and this is inspiration. Just might play mass with one of you.
Cool. All right. Anybody else? Or Amanda, a hand over to you. Amanda or Suzanne. To answer Maria's question, you respond to Maria's question. You want to go first?
I thought the question was posed to Amanda, but but just to say that, Minshall is larger than life, but there are, in the traditional ecosystem of carnival characters, a lot of natural materials are used, so it's there. So if you're playing cow mass is played with leaves and the actual horns of a cow, the entrails of a cow, right? Yeah. Right? And not just that. In the traditional carnival characters, people reuse costumes, right? So there's already, so there's this joke about Royal Gibbons, who's been playing sailor for 20 years. He puts on the same costume every year, right? Might zooz up the color or whatever, right? So you're playing, you reuse. Even in the bigger masquerade traditions, you will deconstruct a costume, keep parts of it, reuse it. Right? So what we need to do is amplify those practices that are already there tacitly in the processes that we use, right? So we need to talk more about those things. And we're talking about carnival, but I deliberately said in the festival ecology. Yes, because in Trinidad there's Ram Leela, there's the Wali, there's Jose, right? When you dance in the moon and what you do with the moon and it's buried and because the Caribbean, I think for me, is so replete with festivals. We have a festival ecology in the Caribbean. In every island there's a festival that uses costumes, performances. And I think and that is part of our life, our daily life. And if we can amplify the ways in which, right, we repurpose the use, not just of the materials and so on, but the performances, as you say, the affect, right, as an aside. So, of course, I was scared crapless because I've never performed as an individual, right? But then I up and come second, right? Which means that the judges recognize something, the people recognize something about what we're doing, the importance of the masquerade tradition throughout the Caribbean in making statements, in being agentic. So sometimes we think Policy with the big P is a white paper on something and a green paper and a yellow paper and orange or whatever. But policy is what people make or do for themselves. And this is where the masquerade tradition, I think, in the performance of the Caribbean is vital, and it is an avenue for further action. And that, to me, is the avenue in. So I don't know if I answered.
I just have one last thing to say, and Suzanne, you have always been performative, so I think this was always there. It was always there.
Agreed. Hi, good afternoon. Did you want to add to that?
Please, go on.
No, I just want, well, I think, Karen, it is. You already answered the question that I had in terms of the effect on the people with the message that you're sending through the costume and mask play. And, but you said you got second place. And is this throughout the whole carnival in Trinidad, or was it?
Category. So
in the
there
category.
are categories. Mm-hmm. So my categories had Dame Lauren. What's the categories, Amanda?
So this is the traditional mask competition that takes place at Adam Smith Square in the week before Carnival.
The week before, okay.
And the competition is separated into various categories depending on the typologies of what is called traditional mask in Trinidad.
Yes.
And the baby doll category, which had been very poorly subscribed in previous years, up until 2020, there were only 4 baby dolls. With the advent of dolly masks and the popularization of the masquerade that we have been doing, it became ever so popular, so that by this year, we had almost in the 20s of entrants into that competition, which I think is a lot of, says a lot, and I'm happy to see it. So Dr. Burke was a part of that category this year, and the performance that she did placed second.
Okay. Yes, but I wanted to find out more or less how the people reacted to it in terms of the message that you're sending through the mass. And do you have, I think you have a children's section as well in your parades.
Yes.
Children's mass. So I guess this is where you can also educate and encourage through this kind of medium to get the education and the change of, I'm sorry, I have my plastic bottle in my bag. So although I have several water bottles at home, it's just easier to pick it up. But I'm getting there. But just to say that it is a real good concept in terms of playing mass and educating about the importance of climate change and resilience, etc. So just to say that the presentations were great, and got some stuff out of it that we can take back at home, which is the British Virgin Islands.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that once upon a time I sat on the board of the NCC, and one of the things that I insisted is the incentivization of greening the festival. So we introduced a green policy, and so this is where policy, so you have to incentivize, right? And we took a long time and went through the various things. What are the materials we are going to incentivize? What are the prizes? I mean, it's not like if you win Ban of the Year, but I think from a big P policy level, you can do that in terms of incentivizing the things that you get people to use. So you encourage them to use what is around them. Yeah.
And there was something that Karen said that I think related very well to Marielle's question. There are some things that are regarded and that are in fact not good for the environment, but somehow also function very well in what we do. When I did the design for this costume for Dr. Burke, one of the first things I said to her is we will create a wire frame onto which we'll put the plastic bottles. Where in nature does wire occur? And yet wire is one of the main materials in Carnival. And it is a material that can be reused, but only until a certain point. Because beyond that point, it will break and become a threat to the masquerader. I think one of the things we have a lot of storytelling in Carnival. and we have a lot of performance, but we don't have a lot of experimentation. We don't have enough investment in the engineering behind masks, in the strength of materials and the types of materials, because we could sit and talk for a long time about reusing and upcycling and various things, which are all great, but we also have to ask about safety. We also have to ask about the future of the costumes. How long do you want to have this with certain materials? Like last year, I saw a beautiful presentation by one of our devils in Carnival, whose entire backpack on which he mounted his wings was made out of various seasonings from his garden. So he had chive and celery, and the entire thing was made out of this material that he picked from the garden the morning of his performance. So he came fresh, right? He came literally fresh. When I saw him, I turned to Marissa, my friend, and I said, well, he's a well-seasoned performer. And the thing is, by the end of that week, that costume is gone. It's beautiful. It's eco-mass. It's exactly the type of innovation we want to see in Carnival, because it does not, it's biodegradable and it doesn't add to waste, but the costume itself disappears over time. It is a point that we can acknowledge, something that we can pay homage to and thank the materials for the time and for blessing us and all of these things. But in terms of archiving and in terms of how we would like to treat with the preservation of artifacts, etc. If you have a vision of young people in the future entering a museum and seeing the things that you do, then the materials you use must be considered. And so in that way, there are some performances that would require stronger materials.
Definitely. I see another hand up. We have to end soon because the next panel is going to come up shortly. I would say the point of our popularization is definitely not limited to mass as well. So I also, when I'm wearing another hat, I manage a band called Freetown Collective in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have an annual carnival show called Welcome to Freetown. And this year we partner with a British sustainability company that their main thing is making live events more sustainable. And so when we partnered with them this year in conjunction with the British Council, I have to say, and literally stripped back every layer of our event, like water, electricity, all the food, just to see how we can make it more sustainable. Because sustainability is not like a label you can put on today for tomorrow. It has to be a journey for us, right? And so I realized that same question that Amanda is asking is not just limited to mass. Like, we now have to redesign, literally sit down. Right? So another great example is this year we featured something called the rope jab, which is, these are people with, like whips, right? But I didn't know that they were made out of like flax. They were made out of an actual tree which they grow in their yards. Yeah. And then I didn't know that. All other Trinidadians knew that except me, right? So I saw the plant, and then I saw the whip, and then I saw the plant, and I saw them making this. And I said, man, this is madness. It was so cool. So, and then I realized, but what we need to look at now is the life cycles of all the different components of it. And we've now had to redesign the entire event, from props to backgrounds because it's about I'm not trying to use a big word, but the materiality, as in the material composition of the event in terms of what are the things that we are going to use every single year. And those things we can design to last for 20 years. And then what are the things that we need for this year only, or for 3 years, or for 5 years. And those things we will design it to be reused and to go back into a cycle. Yeah. And that's what we were able to do this year. And I think all of the mass is actually moving towards that kind of direction where we literally redesigning as we go, right? So it's in live music on my end, it's in the mass on there, and I think that's where the festivals need to go. And this is not just to be attractive to tourists, but for ourselves. You know what I mean? But sorry, go ahead, Amanda, now and take your questions.
Thank you for that, Karen, because exactly what you described there in your last few sentences is our practice in Dolly Mass. I say all the time, we have a lot of upcycling. Yes, we have a lot of donations of materials from various people. Like recently, someone discarded a wedding dress, which I took and then made a costume out of. We also have various practices of reusing costumes as well. But additionally, there are certain things I have to go into the store for and I have to purchase. The trick is to make sure you get as many uses out of that thing as you can. And so the costumes that I brought in my suitcase to Barbados with me are the costumes that you saw in the early parts of the video that was presented last week at Napa. And those same costumes were presented last year in 2024. And those costumes featured in different things, because in Carnival, one of the major problems, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but across the Caribbean, is so much of what we do in terms of costuming is single use, just like the plastic bottles. Even worse, because this is a full body thing that is discarded after one use. And that, I think, needs to be studied in terms of how it impacts our climate emergency in the Caribbean. We don't have the figures behind it as yet, but I am certain if someone were dedicated to research, it would be immense, because this is every year throughout the Caribbean a great amount of material, plastics, etc.
I just want to add very quickly that we should not forget that festivals have ritual components, right? So that if the ritual is to destroy the thing, the artifact, as in Jose, then that's what it calls for, right? So again, okay, good.
So your question?
So, hi everyone, I'm Manolo James. I want to say hi to Alana, Amanda, Dr. Burke, and Dr. Niles. I was really excited by that section of the conversation. So I studied sustainable product design, which doesn't mean anything because I came back incredibly depressed by the system. And that's what was exciting to me about what all of you started to contribute, which is there's the materiality, but also like its use. Those things combine into like the impacts that we see. And rightfully said, as I said, each of you had really critical parts of that conversation that you brought up. The solutions are already here. They're being used in different mass camps, different homes, different yards around the region. And ideally, it's for us to identify it, use the common sense that we have, use the creativity that we have, and mobilize our consciousness. 100%. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arnaldo. I'm gonna ask every panelist, from Alana coming right down, just 1 minute in closing. As we close the panel and allow the next panel to come in, just your 1 minute reflection, a key takeaway from the conversation, something you want to leave with the audience, both online, live, persons watching on TV, and the audience physical.
No, I think it was really interesting, and I think I'm hearing some of the similarities or some similar interests, this idea of materials and the life cycle, and it is really relevant to the built environment also, and we didn't get a chance to talk about that. I think when it comes to architecture, it's a different mindset, because I think the question is the idea of permanence and is something that perhaps we perceive differently. I'm not sure whether in the Caribbean we're ready to be living in homes or have buildings which only last or are designed to last for a very short period of time. We're not ready for that. So in terms of the similarity, in terms of that concept, that really just got me thinking. But yeah, very, very inspiring. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I'm really thankful for this big conversation, because one of the things I could see and feel and understand on the panel is an intersection of thinking that makes sense. One of the earlier things you said, Karen, was about climate change leading to forcible displacement. And when you mentioned that, I remember feeling really shocked. Not shocked as in surprise, but shocked as in excited, because you understand what I mean? Okay, good. All right. Because this is exactly one of the ideas I try to convey in the story, that these women in their time travels, they're constantly being displaced. And the feeling of the displacement is the feeling like passing through a storm.
It's a feeling like drowning in the sea and coming back up again, the high tides, rising tides, right? And so when you said, yes, climate change leading to forcible displacement, I was, yes, we are constantly and currently in the Caribbean passing through these portals of climate change. We are emerging on the other side. We are being forcibly displaced. What we called Caribbean migrations and continue to call Caribbean migrations in our time is heavily susceptible to changing climates. So that's my last 2 cents on the table.
Perhaps what I want to say is that we need to trust the knowledge we have in our big tours, the tacit knowledge we have about how we do things. And just look at how your mother used to take coconut and make sweet bread, and then take the thing and make sugar cake, and then take the shell and put it in her orchids, and nothing was wasted. Yeah? So the examples are there, and we just need to have confidence that those small actions, those micro actions, if scaled and if we believe in them, can actually cause the change that we seek.
So what I wanted to say, I think hearing what you've heard today is this kind of, for me, cements the need for, first of all, connections, making those connections, because listening to even, when Alana started to speak, part of my research is talking to practitioners throughout the Caribbean and Pacific about what are we losing culturally due to climate change. And many of them actually speak about the built environment. One of them actually started to speak about, in both regions, the Caribbean and the Pacific, they said all of our sensitive, historically sensitive material, their independence documents, are in these buildings that are one hurricane away from no longer existing. You know, and they're situated in these places where some of them are thinking, if there is a serious storm or hurricane or typhoon that is coming, I'm taking all of these manuscripts and putting it in my car and I'm driving as fast as I can. Which is crazy if you think about some of the things that they're grabbing. You know, this is like things from the days of slavery, pre-European intervention, that they are willing to pick up from in their cars and just take in the case of natural disasters. And so there is definitely room for connections to actually begin to redesign some of our culturally sensitive spaces like our archives and our museums to make sure they can withstand Category 5 hurricanes. This is one example. And for Arnaldo, just what you just said, I totally understand the frustration, but one of the things that I always say, when you leave a room like this, or you might be watching on TV and you have a qualification that you think no one cares about in the Caribbean, view it differently. You understand? A lot of these things that we are doing in the Caribbean, as Dr. Burke just said, intrinsically, the tradition tends to be very sustainable. And it's only many times when we try to modernize it and we adopt things from other parts of the world in the name of being best practice or something like that, that it becomes really unsustainable, right? And so what I would encourage you to look at the Caribbean as is like almost as a green field. It's a place that you can innovate. You understand? And the truth is, like, a place with problems is a place that requires solutions. You understand? And so that's the reason why we're in a space, and I'm not just saying this theoretically. Like, I spoke to other promoters in the Caribbean when we were embarking upon our circular economy, more sustainable things at Freetown, and people were telling me, other promoters were saying, people don't care about that. Like, the people just want to come and party, they just hold the event. And we were saying, but no, this is a problem, and that means there has to, the solution is calling us. We just have to see it. So that's just a bit of encouragement, so you're less depressed. But please join me in saying thank you to our esteemed panelists. Join me in thanking them for their time and for the effort they put into their presentations. Thank you all for coming out, and for those viewing either online or at home, thank you for your time as well. Thank you for joining us, and please stay tuned for other big conversations here at CARIFESTA. Take care.